Finishing up this 78 Marshall, I've got the new impedance selector switch in place. And Marshall made an oopsie back in 1978. It's a pretty common oopsie. They have two types of common oopsies in this area in Marshalls. Now, right here, we've got this yellow wire connected over here. That's the 4 ohm tap. This purpley wire, gray purpley wire here is 16. I'm red green colorblind, so it may just be pure gray. It looks a bit purpley to my eyes. And this green is 8. And you see the magic, definitely purple wire here. That's the negative feedback connection. In stock form, they have the negative feedback connected to the 4 ohm tap. Now they've got a very nice 100K resistor connected to the between the 4 ohm tap and the presence circuit. So that 100K means that it's supposed to be connected to the 16 ohm tap. If it was a 47K, it would be going to the 8 ohm tap. If it was going to the 4 ohm tap, according to the plan that Marshall originally came up with, it'd be a 27K resistor. But when you have a 100K resistor ahead of that roughly 4.5K on the presence pot, that makes a voltage divider. And that's a big voltage divider, 100K and about 4.5K. And so if you have a weaker signal coming in, like you would have from the 4 ohm tap, you don't get much in the way of negative feedback. So the presence circuit does not do much. And in fact, this amp, since 1978, the presence circuit has not done much. So when I reinstalled this, I connected the feedback to the 16 ohm tap, which is what Jim Marshall was intending back when this whole circuit started. And that is a proper amount of negative feedback going through this 100K to the 4.5K divider that the presence circuit works for the first time in this amp's life. That's one very common mistake Marshall makes. So if you play a Marshall and you love it, and the next one doesn't sound so great and you can't figure out why, that's a common issue right there, where someone just connected the negative feedback to the wrong tap. So if you look at the amp and find the negative feedback resistor, in this case it's 100K, sometimes it's 47, sometimes it's 27. That tells you which tap should be used. So the larger the value of the resistor, the larger the impedance. So 16 versus 8 versus 4, 100 versus 47 versus 27. Pretty simple. The other major oops is sometimes they don't connect the negative feedback wire to any of the 3 taps. They connect it to the center of the switch, which is what always feeds the output jack. And what happens then is, depending on what load is connected, where the switch is connected, you have varying amounts of negative feedback. Now, some players may really love that because you can have, it's rawer at 8 ohms than it was at 16, whatever. But it can also sound really bad at 4 if you were to use it that way. So it's very important, if you want the amp to sound the same, no matter what the impedance of the cab selected is, to have the negative feedback tied to the secondary connection, not the center, because that will change. I see a lot of kit builders who will put the negative feedback connection to the center, and you have a very different response with an 8 ohm cab than a 16 ohm cab. And there are a lot of myths out there that Marshalls sound better with an 8 ohm cab than a 16 ohm cab, or that output transformers sound better with certain loads than others. And I think that's a big contributor to that kind of mythology. Now, with a really cheap output transformer, that can be the case. But in a high-quality transformer like the one in the 78 Marshall or an old Fender, et cetera, a lot of good amps have high-quality transformers. If you have the correct load connected to the correct secondary, you will not hear a difference based on the impedance on the output of the amp. Or if you do, it might be very, very small, so much that a scope might show it, but you don't really hear it reliably. But if you have the negative feedback connected wrong, you will hear a difference, and you'll think, this transformer needs to be running at 8 ohms, or this transformer hates 16 ohms, whatever. That's where myths start. It's all in these little bitty simple details.